And welcome everyone to Every Day with an Angel. And this is a podcast that I'm in my second month doing it, and I'm so excited for everyone who is going to be here or is now here. I'm grateful that I do have a wonderful guest here. I am Natasha Venter. I am a multi-life intuitive. I'm a spiritual life coach. I love to support people go through their life's journey into bringing them up into it. So it's that story of, who were we and how can we merge into this. So Every Day with an Angel is part of that building into who we are to be. And then I have my 2-minute videos that I do weekly or daily during the week to do short little supports. So if you those are called Every Day with an Angel shorts, so you get me every day in my inspiration. Well, today, I am so grateful to have my wonderful guest. Now, Booboo and I have, I did a show. Hi, Soba. Thank you for being here. That there's going to be comments that come up, and I'm so grateful when they are, and I'll show them to you when they are a little bit more engaging. But thank you very much, everyone, for being here. So, Booboo and I have gotten together. He saw me on the Next Level Soul, right? When I was on that, right? That's how
Yes,
we got in touch.
right.
And so then he reached out to me and we had a little bit of a session, phone call. And then all of a sudden he says, I'm starting a podcast. And I said, congratulations, just start it. And his evolution is now that he has one. And actually, you should probably put that as a little, Booboo Garcia broad lens, broader lens podcast. Yes. And so with with his podcast, then I was on that. And Boo Boo, um, uh, hello from UK. So we've got a couple people here from the UK. Veronica, hi, and then we got Soba. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Uh, it's that knowing of who we are. So Boo Boo, you know, when we were talking, you gave me some really big insights on, you used to have an addiction, which I can't say used to. I mean, whenever we have an addiction, it's a lifelong process of negotiating it. But yet, there is a time when we get to the other side of it. It seems like, and we can deal with it on a moment to moment basis or a day to day basis instead of a moment to moment basis. But Boo Boo, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I was born in San Pedro, California, which is the harbor of Los Angeles, where all the longshoremen are, and right by the water. Some of you might remember the show The Love Boat,
Mhm.
and so that's San Pedro. It's a pretty well balanced city. But yeah, I grew up in a family, and just to get it out there, I know today my mother and my father love me very much. My father's no longer with us in form, but my mom and my dad did the best they could with the tools they had. And I know if they would have known better, they would have done better. Just like me being a parent, if I would have known better, I would have done better. And it's just a
Mhm.
learning process in this thing called life, And but I experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of understanding and wrong perception. And my dad would beat me, and I didn't know how to process that. When not all the time, but when he would get really angry at me, he would hit me with the vacuum cord, and that affected me. And I look now, the person I'm supposed to trust the most in this world is hurting me, and I didn't know how to process that as a little kid. And my dad loved me to death. Don't get me wrong. It's called learned behavior passed on. This is what a parent's supposed to do when a kid's being bad.
Mhm. It's what
And
his
I
dad did to him. It's what his dad
Mhm.
did to him. It's what, it's like it goes back. It goes back.
Yeah. So every time I hear about someone that's suffering from addiction, I have to look at what happened to them. Not so much the genes, but what happened to them, and look at their perception and how they perceive life. The genes are a part of it, but more so is, we know about epigenetics, right? Our beliefs is a light switch that turn on and off our gene expression.
Mhm.
So what happened to them? Yeah, and you can always link, and this is what modern science is telling us today, is trauma, some kind of hurt and pain. And the word trauma really means wound.
Yes.
And a lot of times when you're suffering from addiction, you have some kind of psychological and emotional wounds inside, and a lot of it is traumatic. And there's the big T traumas and the little T traumas, like Gabor talks about, or the obvious trauma or the developmental trauma. And the difference is, and I had a conversation with Gabor Mate's son, Daniel Mate, who's a co-author of the book, The Myth of Normal. And they talked about in the book about the big T's are the horrible events that shouldn't have happened, and the little T traumas are good things that never happened. You know, and it all does the same thing, and we get wounded inside, and disconnection with self, and so
Mhm.
recovery is the regain to get back, you know, and trauma is to disconnect or loss of self.
Mhm. And that's the thing is that, we as humans don't realize that when there are traumas that happen to us, especially when they're young, it changes the way our brains form.
Mm,
It changes our DNA. And I understand there's an emotional DNA, there's a spiritual DNA, there's a body DNA, and there's a mind DNA and a digestive DNA. I mean, it's like it's all in the inner workings, and people wonder why we have digestive problems. Well, what happens to it when we were younger, right?
mm,
And it sets us up for not well success sometimes because it creates a pattern of that wiring for keeping us kind of limited in who we are, and then that creates um, unsureness, that creates uncertainty, that creates that lower self-esteem, whatever that can tell, shame, guilt, grief, whatever that is. So I love the way you think about things. And your research is done. I wish I could be a reader that way and read these things, but my brain just doesn't do it.
no,
Dyslexic doesn't do
no,
it well.
to be honest, I learned how to read in the 12-step rooms when I got sober. I didn't know how to read. I never really went to school. I didn't pay attention. I was a
Mhm.
class clown. I was seeking attention, and and I always felt less than.
Mhm.
And that goes from just the way I perceive my relationship with my environment. It's so important to look at our environment. Um, and it created that narrative, that voice in the head, low self-esteem, I'm not good enough. So I had to be the
Mhm.
best at sports. You tell me to do something, I'm gonna be better than you. And I needed to do that because I needed you to feel want to respect me, and I wanted to feel loved and important. And I always
Mhm.
talk about I joined a gang. My parents were both gang members. My dad was shot a few times in two different occasions. My mom was sliced in the back over 50 times. Um, I experienced my dad's friends. Well, as I'm trying to play as a little kid out in the alley, my dad's friends are stabbing each other. And I didn't still know that was normal to me,
Mhm.
and so I didn't have any coping skills with all this emotional baggage building up, and that voice in the head putting me down all the time. I didn't have any coping skills, and I didn't have communication skills. So the first time I drank alcohol, I experienced what Carl Jung said in Latin, spiritus contra spiritum, which means a spirit against spirits. So the spirits of
Mhm.
alcohol gave me relief from what Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, calls a spiritual malady, that disconnection of self. So I
Mhm.
get some relief. And the more emotional baggage I have, the more trauma I have, those inner wounds, the more relief I get. It's like living in Arizona. I usually compare this, use this analogy. If you're at home watching your show on TV,
Mhm.
and you're in a AC and you take a drink of water, you put it down and you continue to watch your show. But if I'm in 115-degree weather taking a hike in Arizona, I'm gonna take a drink of water, and it's gonna have a different effect on me than it did for you. And that's where the addiction comes in, because now my mind and body record a solution. And the more I do it, the harder it is to break because it
Mhm.
becomes habitualized.
It really does. It really does. And I actually find that anytime you have an addiction to something,
Mm.
there is a energy that gets attached to us that keeps us going. I want you to keep doing this. I want you to keep doing this. And it's not necessarily like it's not like a spirit from someone who's passed. It's this energy that just it's almost like when somebody's in anger, this anger just, it's almost like, this bundle of energy that walks behind us.
mm,
Well, it creates this energy, and the more longer that we drink it, or the more we're in that addiction or mindset, that it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it gets harder and harder, because as this energy walks with us, it's almost like walking around with a ball and chain, and you can't get rid of it, right?
mm,
Until you make some conscious decisions, and then slowly it it goes down, and then it slowly goes away. And I watched this after my husband, who had been drinking since he was 12, 14 years old, and then using pot and coke during different times, as he told me that, because I wasn't married to him at that time, that he, I could see this energy that was attached to him,
mm.
you know, and then as he's now separated, 11 years sober, that that it's not even close to him anymore, right? Because it's that story. So I'm interrupting you here. I
No,
apologize.
no, I appreciate it. Yeah, and
You
yeah, I
know,
was
go ahead.
no, I was addicted to anger. You brought up anger, and I was a very violent drunk. I was super violent when I was drinking, and it was like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde analogy.
Mhm.
You know, and they say hurt people, or I like to say traumatize people, and I did that. I hurt a lot of people, mentally, physically, and spiritually. You know, in the 12 step rooms, they say the alcoholic is like a tornado roaring their way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken and sweet relationships are dead. And that's what I was. I was a tornado. I was a tornado, and I hurt a lot of people. Not everybody. I still loved people. I still had a lot of good qualities in me, but the bad things started to happen. My behaviors and my drinking started to go way out of control, started to overweigh the good part of me, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
It does, and that's there again is that energy that I was talking about. Starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we lose ourselves because the mind starts changing,
Mm,
you know, because of the fact that, and I think that that depends on what drink you drink,
mm,
because beer has its own addiction. Hard alcohol does. And then you have the pot or the cannabis or whatever people are calling it now, and then all the other, addictions that we have nowadays and past days, that it's just amazing how it changes here, our
mm,
mind. You get the energy, and then starts changing how our different organs. It's kind of like addicted to sugar. you know? There's something that in us says, "Oh, I want more. Oh, I want more. Oh, I
mhm,
want more." And addictions can happen in different forms. You're talking about one form of addiction, but I want people that they can apply what we're talking about onto any addiction. Gambling, food, um, uh, an emotion, anything that someone is addicted to. So, Veronica, thank you very much. So, I had a hypnotherapist ask me what I was running from. He said that that's why I drink. Can you explain this? So, running from, you know, when we get into an addiction, we run. It brings us into another mindset, like you were saying, Boo Boo, about how that it puts us in a different mindset. So, can you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, for me, I was running from reality. I didn't want to see the person I become. And I needed, in the 12 step rooms, they talk about there's what you call the 12 steps. And in the third step area, there's a third step prayer. And in the prayer, it says, relieve me from the bondage of self. And that's
Mhm.
what alcohol did for me. It relieved me from me. I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. I needed relief from being me. So I needed to shift my consciousness, and alcohol did that for me. If that makes any sense.
Oh, it totally does make sense because it's like we have some realities, and I know Veronica well. She's been a client or a friend, and a client even longer. Over now, what, 15 years, I think. That and she says it does. So it's that thing that we can be running things from our families
Mhm.
that have set up. We can be running from something that happened to us, like. like me being molested when I was 3-4 years old, that that's something that I could have secretly been running from, and even my sugar to this day could be part of that. And I haven't looked at it, but I've handled that scenario pretty good now. But it's like, what do we do now? You spoke about how your life was. Now, how did you go through the process of starting to heal that?
Well, Eckhart Tolle, the spiritual teacher, says, "In the beginning of all addiction, there is pain, and at the end of all addiction, there is pain." Or Carl Jung would say, "There's no coming to consciousness without pain."
Mhm.
And Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, even said, um, you know, pain is the touchstones of spiritual progress. And I was in so much pain, and not everyone has to go through pain. Some people could have a moment of clarity, but for me, I was in so much pain. I woke up November 14th, 2009, and I still remember the day, and I remember what happened. Actually, my friend who just recently passed away was really one of my best childhood friends, but he was in and out of prison, suffering from a lot of trauma, and he got out, and he was found dead not too long
Mm.
ago. And he told me, because I didn't know he was in the room with me that day, November 14th, 2009. He said I was in the room and it sounded like I was fighting my demons. And he was so scared to interrupt that, he just left me alone. And and I feel like today I'm learning to live, not just for me, but for my friends who never made it,
Mm.
out of the concrete jungle. Because there's a lot of booby traps we get caught up in, and but I don't that day, November 14th, 2009, I experienced what the Buddha called nirvana. And the
Mm.
word nirvana means to blow out. And for a
Mhm.
brief second, I was no longer had that I blew out that little egoic flame of self, that
Mm,
suffering
mhm.
self, all those identities. And as a matter of fact, I had a moment where I was out of the body. I was no longer identified with the mind and the body. And I was in a state of nothingness, maybe some peace, some calmness. But as quick as that turned off, it was like those magic candles that turned back on. And I was
Uh,
in fear. I was scared. I was shaking. I needed help. And my
mhm.
buddy opened the door and sometime that day, and he asked if I wanted to go to a 12-step meeting. And then I took some other advice. Albert Einstein says you can't solve your problems in that same level of consciousness that continues to create the problem. And I was
Ain't
willing
that
to
a truth?
yeah. And I was willing to take other advice. I was so beat up, and I was so willing to do whatever to get out of this situation. I was scared for my life
Mhm.
because I put a 38 to my head a few days before that. But I seen my daughter's eyes, and I couldn't do it. I wanted someone else to kill me, and it just didn't happen. I wanted another gang member. As a matter of fact, that day, November 13th, it was a shooting, and I didn't get shot. But I got drunk, I blacked out, it caused a lot of violence and just a lot of chaos in my life. And the last thing I was holding on to on the streets was my pride. And I got
Mm.
beat up. I was popping so many pills, and I was so drunk I couldn't even fight. But I have a big mouth like Tupac. I like to say I think I'm Bruce Lee when I'm drunk. And Boy George all put together. I'm just messing around with the Boy George part.
Ain't that a mixture?
That's right. But yeah, I woke up that day. I woke up in a different state of consciousness, and I knew to my inner core of my being that I was no longer gonna drink and live the way I was living anymore.
I've heard a couple people who had a uh big bang moment, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
call it. My friend Regan, who did my show with me for several years, he talked about the day that he became sober,
Mm,
through his addiction, and he had a dream, and he realized that he was not gonna do that addiction anymore. And it was one of those magical moments where, he was supposed to be on a plane. He ended up spending the night in a hotel. His wife decided to stay in another room, and he had that aha moment. My
mm,
husband said he had the aha moment, you know, that he got caught by cops. I was at the dentist. He walked outside and said, "God, I don't want to be this man anymore." And he said that he had this, like, something that washed over him
mm,
that just became, and he didn't tell me this until about, just the last couple years, that he told me that he too had an aha moment,
mm,
and he hadn't drank. People are like going, "How can you not all of a sudden that switch come off and you don't want to do it anymore?" It's because of that I'm going to call it a God moment.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only word I can say is it's a God moment that that somebody else steps in and says, you, and I call it, the people call that, that there's people who say that, there's a soul that, soul transition, that, one soul comes out, it comes in and another one goes out, that soul transference. I call it a I call that an exodus of a part of a soul.
Mm,
The addiction goes, I'm out of here, right? Or that part of us that needs leaving, that part of our soul leaves us to become our truer, cleaner self, whatever that is, right?
mm.
If that makes any sense.
Makes a lot of sense. It was like an inner shift that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then that Saint Francis prayer came alive. The last sentence is only by dying that one awakens to eternal life. And the old self died. And I woke up into, like, I know there's no such thing as death. I know death is an illusion created by the mind. The body may leave. I may leave the body, but who I really am doesn't die.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I got some help. I started following, went to the 12-step community, the fellowship, and I started having another spiritual awakening, not more spiritual experiences by learning how to live on spiritual principles. And what that did for me is it gave me new coping skills to deal with life. And now I know how to suffer. And if you learn how to suffer, you suffer much less, if that makes any sense. Because we're still going to suffer, you know.
But it shifts your perception to know that it's not about you. It's
Mm,
not to punish you. It's about teaching you moments. It's that knowing that this is a world that we're in to learn and to express and to expand. And the only way we can do that is by having these trigger moments, these moments of awarenesses that go, that it's like, well, why did I have a rough day? Well, if you look back, how did you negotiate it? And like, I was talking to somebody about how, they say, why am I so spiritual when things are going good, and then I have reality in life? And I go, because that's the time when life says, okay, you've gotten your awareness with your spirituality, let's practice it.
mm,
Let's see if you can practice it. Oh, you need to learn a little bit more. Okay, so we'll give you a break and we'll let you practice it a little bit more. And let's put you back in a moment where you can say, oh, do I really know my stuff? Am I going to really walk this path of spirituality, right? So, you talk about the 12-step program, and I can tell you right now, I'm going to say that and I'm going to name it the AA program. It's free. It's something that you can go to as many meetings as you want. So if you have anything that is of addiction, please know that there are services out there. Food Anonymous, Gambling Anonymous, Alcoholic Anonymous, whatever it is, that there is a way to get help. And I want people to try to get help. And there's ways of doing it, but if you're struggling with money, you can go to 12 meetings in a day if you have to, so you don't go into the bars, right? And so it's that moment where, please, please, please don't do it alone. My husband tried to do it for years by himself. Well, he says he didn't really try to do it by himself for years, but when he really got truly help, that was the thing that gave him the hooks to get into, to say, I can climb my way through this for a while, until he got the tools. So with that, so how do you find your knowings? I mean, you're really good at, and I love how you do this. You have this awareness of what you've read is right there when you need it. But how did you find your stepping stones to get from that life of gangs, and in the heart of drama and trauma and pain, and the physical pain, because you're watching people hurt themselves and kill each other, and yet at the same time, and then that physical pain that comes to you because somebody's trying to do the same thing to you. How do you go from something like that, and only knowing those skills, to becoming who you are. And I understand practice makes better. I get that. But how did you, because sometimes people need that little bit of texture to find
Mm.
paths, to find wisdom, if that makes sense.
Well, ever since I was a kid, I always felt like I lived in other I had a little bit of glimpse or remembrance of past lives. So, like, I always felt when I was a kid, remember watching Indiana Jones for the first time, I felt like I'd been there. I know that environment. Like, it was an
Mhm.
inner knowing. Now, I don't have much detail beyond that, but I always felt like I lived in China or like somewhere in the Himalayas area. I felt like Egypt or ancient Kemet. That's the original name of Egypt. And um, places like that. So I always had this inner knowing, but when I had my awakening, I went back to those teachings without even realizing it until later I realized that. And I felt guided by a lot of well, who we call mystics, and I felt like
Mhm.
I was pointed to different information and looking at different religions and the Gnostics and esoteric teachings. I felt sometimes I was given a little bit of stuff, and other times it was just pointed to the direction, and I had to do the research. Like I don't read a book cover to cover. I didn't know how to read until really
Mhm.
well until a little bit later. Um, I read just what I need to read, like a paragraph or two, or like 6 pages out of a book. That's what I need at that time, and then
Mhm.
more will be revealed. But I learned how to also when I got into the 12-step community, I learned how to wax on, wax off like the Karate Kid, if that makes sense. And
Mhm.
I don't know why I'm doing this kind of stuff, coming to a meeting early, leaving late, but I'm learning how to be of service. What every religion teaches, I could put in one word, saloa, serving and loving one another. And that's what
Mm.
I learned in the 12-step community. I learned how to be of service to people. And I also learned how to have new coping skills and be aware of things like I always say I love the word ignorance because it's an extension of the word ignore. And I ignored my daily life for very long time. And today, spirituality for me is taking responsibility for my own thoughts and my own actions on a daily basis. And when I do screw up, I always say I don't suffer from alcoholism, but I suffer from assholism at times. And but I can
Love
take
that.
res I can make right on that stuff, and I do get fearful. I still have all that stuff because 'cause I'm a human being, right?
Mhm.
I'm having a human experience, and, but I don't get drowned in that stuff like I used to. I don't get stuck in it, and, the word addiction comes from the Latin word addictus, which has something to do with being a slave, and I was a
Mhm.
slave to these behaviors, a slave to this substance, a slave to et cetera, but I'm no longer that, and because I have that light of awareness shining forth within me.
And congratulations. Because that is, I mean, even me who, I've had, well, when I was dealing with the grief of my family passing away in 7 years, I kind of had a spending addiction. And then, dealing with an alcoholic husband at the same time of having kids. So I was a little bit where, I needed those endorphins just to say that I was alive still sometimes, you know? And so when, coming out of that, we that's how we get through things. It's knowing that, the skills that we get, we have to look back and see how far we've come because it is about not drowning anymore.
Mm,
And I understand that's what the true word of spirituality is.
mm,
It's having the skills and the tools to move forward, move up out of the drowning of we're in the day-to-day life. And you use the word awareness, that you were ignorant about things. You didn't want to see things. You didn't want to be observant in life. And I can tell you, people always wonder, how do I get through what I do? And I go into observation.
mm,
I go into observation. Everything around me is a message from the universe. Conversations I have. I had a little spider on me today, and it wasn't, and I didn't even see it. A kid goes, "There's a spider on you." And it was just a little itty bitty one. And I go, "Where?" And he goes, "Right there." And I said, "Oh, my little friend. Thank you." Because spiders about what do we want to weave into our new web, right?
mm,
What are we going to grow into? What are we going to jump into? What are we ready to move into, right? It's about being able to get our legs and go in different directions, right? But it was little. So what little detail am I missing Thank you. I need to get back to my emails. A little detail am I missing or needing to look at to help myself be more aware of my world around me?
Mm.
Because it is the little things that help build the stones to the big things, right? So with that little guy had a big message for me, right? So the world around us is huge. People always say, "Hey, I want to have a card reading," right? I'd like to get a card reading. Well, pay attention to the world around you. The cat that runs in front of you, the dog, the birds, the humans, the billboards, the truck. Hey, the bison truck in front of you that says bison all over it, right? Well, bison weather the storm. Do you know that they are the ones of the animals that walk into a storm?
Mm.
The bison actually walk into a storm head first because they know if they walk into it, it passes over them faster.
Wow. Never knew that.
Yeah. So when you think about it, how can we be a bison? Because I know one thing, if I run from something, it's going to last a whole lot longer. And observing my husband, when he got drunk when he was 12, 14 years old, I, as a wife, not treating him like a 12-year-old, but honoring the part of him that needed and asked to mature
Mm.
and the expansion of that. So holding space when he was, or allowing space, I'm going to say, when he was stretching and pulling, learning how to be angry without alcohol, how to be loving. He actually had to learn what love was. I bet you had to learn what love was.
Yeah, I spelled it backwards, EVOL, evil, and I became a very evil person. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to learn how to spell it correctly and learn how to have understanding. And I truly believe understanding is love's other name. When I can truly understand people or their situation, or try to have some kind of understanding, like I can love them.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness is there, or just compassion is there. And yeah. So one of the greatest things for me I learned in the 12-step community and through the 12 steps, there's a line in the 12 steps book, and it's called and it says be prepared to look at things from an entirely different angle. And you talked about it. I learned how to change my perception, or Wayne Dyer said it perfectly. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Oh
And
my
that's the
gosh.
greatest thing I've ever learned in the 12 step in spirituality, is learning how to change my perception with a certain situation. It's like changing the gears, right? And I learned how to shift gears. And I may not do it all at once, but I know how to do that where I don't get stuck anymore. And before I always say my first language wasn't English or Spanish; it was Victimese. I was a victim of my circumstances, right? I
I
spoke
love
Victimese
that.
all the time.
Yeah, I'm not laughing at it, but I'm just like,
No, no.
what a word to really state, because so many of us are taught, honestly, because we didn't know better to do better, how to be victim.
Mm.
How to be victim. And even my kids who grew up in a household of an alcoholic family, right? That, there's been many a times when they were young and I said, I know dad's angry and I know that he's been drinking, but you got to still listen to what he said. There's something what he said has validation. We gotta kind of put boundaries up, or whatever the word was I chose at the time, because I was in survival mode sometimes, that, at least let's listen to what dad was asking for. He wants to be heard. Nobody's hearing him. So how can we listen to him? How can we make sure he's heard? Let's do a couple things that he was mentioning, so that he sees that we were hearing him. Now, did that help him? Because he tended to be a little bit of a narcissistic attitude, but yet at the same time, it was part of that. I was teaching my kids that it wasn't necessarily the alcohol that was talking, but it was the part of him that really wanted to be negotiated with. So I tried to work my family out of victim,
Mm.
even though we had that scenario going on. I don't know how well I did. My kids said I did pretty good, but that's the only reason why I know, because my kids said I did. Mom, you weren't that bad.
Yeah,
So how did that now, how long have you been without a
alcohol or drugs. Well, drinking was my drug pretty much, but I popped a lot of pills as well at the very end. But it's been since November 14, 2009. Yeah, that's the day I woke up and I stopped. I changed my whole life.
Mhm.
And one thing I would like to
I know
mention.
you said that before. I'm sorry, I didn't get an
Oh no, it's
attachment to
okay.
that, so I'm sorry.
Another thing I would like to mention is that you hear in the rooms in the 12-step community, the acronym of fear. It's F everything and run. And that's what I was so used to is F everything and run. That's why I'm numbing myself, right? Or
Mhm.
behaving certain ways. I don't know how to face difficult situations that may feel hurt. That little scared little boy inside is scared, and I
Mhm.
want to run. But I learned how to face everything and rise. Rise in what? Rise in consciousness. And so today I know to the core of my being that whatever I'm going through is for one reason and one reason only. It's to learn in the expansion of
Mm.
consciousness.
Mhm.
So today, like I said, I don't speak victimese anymore, but I know that obstacles that are coming my way are not blocking me from the path. Those obstacles are the path. So I always have something to experience and learn from and grow
Mhm.
in my soul
Exact
journey.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I always whenever I get into something, the first thing I've practiced to say is, "What is this here to teach me?
Mm,
What is this here to teach me? Why am I in this? What is this here for?" And then I practice on getting the person out of the situation. So, in other words, okay, so I'm being challenged by this situation. Not necessarily my friend told me this. It's, okay, what is it that the conversation was about? So it gets it into the story of where we're at and what we're doing so I can learn from that and then go, "Okay, now how do I interact with the person after I see why that's triggering me? Why is that bothering me? What is this here to teach me?" So then I know how to work with the person or the thing, right? And that's changing the perception like we were saying earlier. Yeah. In order to negotiate this world, perception is 90% of it. And then interaction or reaction is the other percentage, right?
yeah, you're right. And the Buddha observed the world and said, most people suffer from wrong perceptions. And he's right. I suffered from wrong perceptions and I learned how to change it. And like I hated my mother and father. I loved them, but I had a hate and love relationship and they didn't even know that. Just that
Mhm.
was just me. And I developed all these resentments towards my mother and my father and the world around me. And when I started to practice understanding me, and my own suffering, man, I had so much, like I became more life sensitive because of that and less ego sensitive. And that's the difference maker today. And an awakening looks like for me today is I see a lot of people stuck in boxes and those boxes represent belief systems.
Mm,
And
mhm.
and when you can get outside of that box, you can see things in a broader level, and not suffer from all these belief systems and create division and hate. You see it in the political or religious systems and
Mhm.
et cetera, et cetera. 12-step communities, you see it anywhere. There's always some kind of box that people get trapped in. So for me, that's when you can be outside of the boxes and look with a pure heart. That's what Jesus meant. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Those pure in heart for me means you have less ego identities, and you look at everything as one. And when I could see that, and I could see the unnecessary suffering that's caused in our societies, and I just want to be more helpful. Like it's hard to have an awakening and not want to be helpful.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's that breath in and breath out with spirituality.
Yeah.
It is about that it's not about me, but it is about me. Because without me being strong and willing to negotiate the world, then how am I going to support others in that story? Right? How can I ask, how did you start finding that self-love? What were some of the steps that you had to do to find that self-love? Because it doesn't sound like you were very loving to yourself earlier in your life because you didn't know better to do better, right?
I
You started
replayed.
out loved as a little infant, but yet
Yeah, you're right.
the journey of life gets you through a little bit.
I think replaying the resentments and the 12 steps. And what I did is, we talked about looking at it from a different angle. And I sat in the audience and I replayed that resentment with the individual or reenactment in my mind. And I just looked at where did I have fear? Where did I feel threatened or afraid of
Mhm.
losing something or not getting something? And looking at their behavior, how they reacted to me, and see how that affected me, and how I wanted these people in this crowd to see me as, and
Mhm.
where is that persona being hurt or threatened? Because if you know who I really am inside, you're not going to want to be around me. I joined a gang not to be a bad person. I joined a gang because I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to
Mhm.
feel a part of. And a lot of my
Something.
other friends, yeah, that joined gangs felt the same way.
Mhm. That's what I
So,
understand. It's the family that they didn't have a family in.
yeah, or at least we felt we didn't have a family. Some people didn't have a family at all, and I had a family, but I felt like I didn't. It's wrong perception. I didn't know how to process things correctly,
Mhm.
and so I think,
But at the same time, though, you were, beaten by
yeah,
a man that you thought you could trust, and how can you feel like you have a family when that family is just as harsh as the world outside of you? You
yeah.
know,
So,
the inside the house is just as harsh as the outside of the house.
yeah, I wish I can show parents today, especially younger couples. Um, I wish I can tell them to put a fragile sign on their kids, like look at their kid and see a fragile sign on their brain, because it's so fragile and we don't realize how fragile our kids' minds are, and
Mhm,
to help them process things and communicate the importance of that, and they should teach that in school as well, how to have coping skills, because I didn't know how to process things,
mhm.
correctly, and if I don't know how to communicate and process things right, where's it gonna go? What's gonna
Exactly.
create? Yeah, so
Exactly, and that's the balance, and I know that's one reason why that, I have been asked, by spirit to stay in the elementary school that I
mm,
work in, is because of the, I'm one of many. I'm not saying I'm the only one, but I am one of many, and it takes a community to raise a child.
yeah,
And I've had a couple kids who come back to me and say, "Mrs. Venter, you were the one on the playground, weren't you, that said this to me?" And I said, "Yes." Like, I had one kid
mm,
who was walking by me and he says, "I'm such a bad kid." And I said, "Wait, you're not a bad kid. You may make not good choices, but you're definitely not a bad kid. You are a great kid who
mm,
hasn't learned how to do good choices yet. So start making better choices, practicing that, and you'll be a better kid doing better. You'll be a good kid doing better." And, that's the thing is that we don't realize how much we impact our own lives by our
you're right.
choices um and that kind of thing. So there's a comment here, real quick here. Boo Boo, I'm wondering how you could shift your life after November 9th. Who helped guide you mental and physically? So this is,
Financially,
yeah.
do they mean financially or physically? Um,
Sorry, dyslexic here. Let me
I,
see. Financially.
okay, good question. My friend that I knew from the streets, growing up, where I grew up in San Pedro, he just got out of a rehab and he let me stay in his apartment. As a matter of fact, he let me stay in one of his apartments he was renting out because it was vacant, before he got out of his own recovery. So when he came out and he took me to that first meeting, he let me stay with them for a year because I was
Mm.
homeless and I didn't have anything left. Everything that gave me that sense of self was gone, right? So he gave me some financial support, and what was the other question part? The mental part?
Who helped guide you, mentally and financially? And we did talk about this a little bit at the beginning. I don't know if you've just come in, and I don't know how to say your name. Sorry. Let me see here. Allah, Allah, Mama.
Yeah, the 12-step community helped me, and they helped me think for me until I could recreate a new mind, a healthy mind to think for myself. So
Mm-hmm.
I took advice from people, and another thing is changing my actions and my habits. That helped me in learning how to be more grateful, have gratitude in my heart, because I complained a lot, and complaining only strengthens the ego, right?
Ain't that a truth?
It's another addiction.
Yeah, I've even come up with, gosh, today was so rough, but I'm grateful that I survived it. It's like put gratitude on whatever you're saying, and it shifts the whole mindset because you cannot be in gratitude and be in a bad mood at the same
Mm.
time. That is the one thing our brain cannot be is in gratitude and something else at the same time. You're either in gratitude or you're in the bad mood, and you or the that downward spiral, whatever. The positive and more the negative. It's like, you and that's one thing that can shift your brain cells, and your brain is gratitude. So if you want to get out of anything in the negative sense, depression, stories, find something to be grateful for. I remember when my husband was kind of in that transition right before he got sober, and then I would ask him, he'd come home, God, my day was such a bad freaking day. I said, what was three things that happened that were good today? And he couldn't think of them. And I said, didn't you wake up to me this morning? Because that wasn't obvious, right? And he knows what kind of person I was. And he goes, yeah. I said, oh, and you came home to a dinner being made? Oh, yeah. Oh, and I bet you had a client that came in and made you laugh, right? Yeah. So I would name off, and I didn't always go to me. I would name off maybe three things at work that I knew would happen. You know, I know Kirk would make you laugh today. Yeah, he did. It's like, but I had to almost stretch and pull him, to even think about something that was good. And that's the thing is, you know, people don't realize how much practice makes better. You got to practice your way out of your life, however it is, if you want to better yourself. So, some of your day-to-day practice skills, what did you do that were some of your day-to-day practice skills, if I can ask that?
Today or back then
Kind
when
of
I was
in
getting
that
sober?
transition, and even today, because I mean, after having time being sober, you kind of realize that people don't realize that things can get better the longer you're
Mhm.
sober, because they're so in the downward spiral at the beginning, but it can get better.
Yeah, I think just going to a lot of meetings, getting commitments, and learning how to be of service to people, talking to people, getting advice, just all that good stuff. That Native American saying, inside all of us, there's a good wolf and a bad wolf, and the one you feed the most is the one that gets bigger. So I started
Mhm.
feeding the good wolf more than the bad wolf because I was unconscious of it. I would say your ego's not your amigo when you're unconscious of it. And I was unconscious of that narrative, that voice in the head, and all that stuff. And learning how to change my story, like we talked about in that last episode we recorded on my podcast, right? About
Mhm.
changing the story. And because in Hollywood, when I was a kid, the only time I seen a Mexican guy on TV was when he was a convict, a
Mhm.
rapist, illiterate, et cetera, et cetera. All negative stuff. So what is that message is that telling me?
Yes.
I don't see any superheroes looking like me. So I didn't know how to process. So I created a story. As a man thinketh that is mine, so is he. And next thing you know, I become that what I see in Hollywood. So I had to change the narrative, change the story, but be aware of it first of all, and see that all that negative thinking.
Mhm. And that's the thing about life is like we talked about changing our perception, but we can rewrite our movie. We can rewrite
Mhm.
our story of our life at any point in time. And it's that no. So uh I asked that because for sure you were in a very vulnerable situation, right? Lost and looking for guidance. Did anyone try to take advantage of that? That's a good question.
Yeah, I know. I guess I'm lucky. I had no one trying to take advantage of that. Everyone was willing to help me, you know. And when I went into the 12-step community, I felt like a piece of crap, and they were like flies coming to this piece of crap, you know. And they were buying me dinner, giving me rides, asking me. They, some people say they love me back to life. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt a lot of love coming in, and it poured, and people actually cared, and I started to become friends with people and started to feel a part of something and have a new purpose in life.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that, if we are being taken advantage of, we're not hanging out with the right people.
Mm.
You gotta change the people you're hanging out with, and that's one thing that, um, that's one thing that I noticed, like, I had a family member who, they were in one part of town, one part of, a city, and they ended up moving to another part where they wouldn't even have been able to hang out with the same friends, but they collected the same friends. They collected the same type of friends. So that scenario followed them because they attracted the same people who were sabotaging them because they didn't know how to get better. They didn't know how to do better. So if you're feeling like you're being sabotaged or somebody is sabotaging you, you got to put some boundaries around it. And that's the thing is that we surround the people who they surround your people with the people that you want to become. Let the people around you, if you're hanging around with people who are always spending money, always in debt, you're going to be in debt and you're going to be spending money. If you're around people who are positive and more inspirational, you're going to be more inspirational. So surround yourself with people of how you want your life to be and become. And because you are who you are, but you're not, but you can be someone you're becoming too. And sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. That's where that saying came in. I think you got to fake it till you make it. And it's not to say that you fake it for a long time, but you got to start the wheel rolling somehow. And sometimes you have to do it. And that's the thing is sometimes we have to have a little ego to go into our first meeting,
Mm.
right? You have to have a little bit of, hey, I can do this. I'm not a nobody and I can get in the doors. Then you realize when you're in the doors that you are someone and you don't have to be ego. But sometimes we use our egos to get through the doors of getting help and allow that to happen, right? Allow that to happen.
But there are some people you got to be careful for, and there are some what they call predators. You know, we were going in a room full of people that are looking for help, and some didn't get the help, and some have a lot of trauma in other ways, and so you do got to be careful there.
Hmm.
And so I would try to find people you can trust and that are really active in the program and doing the deal and speaking from their heart, because there are some people you got to be careful for. Yeah.
Hmm. I understand that that it's the people who are in there the longer are the ones that have been more weathered.
Mm.
They've been more weathered, and so it's not wrong or right. Everybody's journey is gonna be a little bit different. We all have individual paths. Sometimes it's not a straight line, you know, getting to where we're getting to. If it's not curvy, you're not doing life right. It's about the tug and pull, and it's about the learning. So with our spirituality, I love the way that you communicate about the way you walk your life. You use a lot of tools, lot of metaphors. And I can say I do the same thing. It's that, like I've used a lot of my tools where I'm not doing anything wrong, but there's something I can change, right? I'm not doing anything wrong, but there's something I can change. And that's how I've gotten through a lot of my years with my husband who's been learning to be sober. Even though he's been sober 11 years, he's still learning. His personality is still learning how to be, and sometimes, I call him dry drunks. Sometimes he slips back into an old pattern, you know, and it's up to me on how I interact with it. Do I become the victim of it? Or do I become someone who can honor that moment and say, I'm not dealing with this anymore?
Mm.
And I'm not doing it with ego. I'm doing it with, I'm just not doing this anymore, babe. I love us enough to not do this anymore. And that's the thing when we're in partnership with someone who's working through an addiction. We have to give the opportunity for change to happen. At the same time, though, we have to have boundaries with that part of that scenario, even in me, because there's a part of my scenario that I have to have boundaries with that interacted with the alcoholic, right? Because as he got sober, I had to become um, less passive aggressive and less victimed, right? And then too, at the same time, I had to find out that, hey, he's not drunk and passed out at 7 o'clock at night, so I can't just watch whatever I want to watch on TV. Now I got to share the TV, right? So there's these pluses and these minuses that happen in relationships when someone starts getting sober or starts learning to change their addiction. Just like my husband who watched me spend money, he's now having to learn that I'm not the same person anymore, and he has to give me grace. You know, it's an interesting tug and pull, right? It's an interesting tug and pull, having partnerships, having relationships, having knowings about each other, and these stories of how are we supposed to be. Please give ourselves and each other grace. It's life.
I always say, if you think you're spiritual, try getting in a relationship. No, but once the unconscious becomes conscious, enlightenment occurs, and an awakening is not one deal, one process, one event. I think there's a lot of different types of awakenings, and yeah, and sometimes I got to die to blossom back, and it's just different seasons, and there's always room for improvement, especially within myself. I still got to be more aware of the patterns I have and the way I react, look at my emotional reactions and all that good stuff. But the more I be the observer and become more of the awareness behind the thoughts or the emotions, um,
Mm-hmm.
the more healthier I become, if that makes any sense. So,
Mm-hmm.
but there's always room for improvement for myself.
Yes, and that's the thing is that if I can invite people to have anything in out of this story is that, it's enough to be vulnerable enough to say we're not perfect. And that's what I like about that mantra. I'm not doing anything wrong, but there's something I can change.
Hmm.
Because it's
Yeah.
not about ego. It's not about saying that I'm perfect. But it's enough to say that, hey, I can change something, but don't tell me it's that interesting place, and I explain it like saying that, sometimes my husband who works 12-hour days, when he comes home from work, he wants dinner and he doesn't like to eat at 6:30, 7 o'clock. Okay. I know that about him. So that's a trigger for him, right? So if I cook dinner at 6:30, I'm not doing anything wrong, right? I'm not doing anything wrong, but I can change something. So if I know that that's a trigger for him, I can mention, "Hey, babe, this is the night I'm going to be until 5:30, or I'm going to be until 6:30, 7 o'clock. What do we want to do for dinner?" I'm changing the way I communicate so that trigger, which I'm not doing anything wrong by cooking later, but I know that's a trigger for him, right?
Hmm.
So I'm not doing anything wrong, but there's something I can change to better the whole situation so that we can be enlightened with more communication, I guess, for lack of better word, right? So there again is that, we can always better ourselves to move forward. And that's what life is here to teach us, is to better ourselves so we can move forward.
Utilizing the power of understanding, because it's powerful to start practicing understanding, you know,
Mhm.
and that's what I heard from you, and that's beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because, he's not wrong in his trigger. You know, he's been up since 4 o'clock. I don't blame him for wanting to eat. Life is life.
Yeah.
Thank you, Boo Boo, for being here. Is there any last words or any last minute? Because we've come to our hour. Oh, this happens fast. Oh, I'm going to have you back on, by the way,
No
if
problem.
you would like it. That,
Sure.
that, is there any last words that you'd like to leave anybody?
Just thank you for listening, and um to be honest, I really don't have any last words, but I appreciate you guys listening, and hopefully you got something. My whole deal is to be a hope dealer today, and I
Mm.
love the acronym for hope is to help other people evolve, and that's my main thing is to just help each other. And as Ram Dass says, we're all just walking each other home. So
Mhm.
yeah, just challenge ourselves to have more understanding, and understanding is love's other name. And the more I can understand, like you said, a beautiful example with your husband, the more you can understand his triggers or things he don't like. You don't have to do certain things, so you don't have to trigger that, or you diffuse a little bomb with that understanding, and you can stay in love, right? So
Exactly, and that's the way. So it's that. So there was a question, and we're at the end of the hour, and I apologize for whoever's been here to watch at the end here. But there was one little question. I think we can answer this real quick if you don't mind. I asked because let's see. You were very vulnerable in this situation, right? Oh, sorry about that. That was the wrong one. Okay, I find it difficult to apply. There are things that I wish would happen in my life, and I find myself in a controlling way. Um, first off, he asked about the how did you trust the universe and everything that happens for a reason? Uh, so it's that thing that you know, sometimes I have the mantra sometimes, I trust, surrender, accept because I don't have all the information yet. I use mantras that help me set up into a pattern. I also use, in the 12-step program, they use the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the wisdom to know the difference. And I'm saying it wrong. Shoot.
the courage to change things I
Things I
can, and the
can.
wisdom to know the
Wisdom to know the
difference.
difference. Hmm.
Yeah, it's a beautiful prayer. Yeah. It's hard to answer that question because everyone's different.
Hmm.
For me, I was willing to trust someone else better than trusting myself, because I was done with the way I was tired. They say being sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired of my life being in that certain situation. So I had to learn how to trust someone else
Hmm.
with my life.
That makes
Easier said
sense.
than done.
It really is. It really is. And I would say that, living with someone who, my parents passed away when I was, 28, 29. And so for me, little things are why worry about them, right? Um, and I've had a lot of grief, and that teaches me that I don't have to worry about the little things. My husband never learned that lesson. He was drunk when my parents were passing away, so he never really learned that little lesson. So he tried to control a lot of the little lessons. In other words, dinner needs to be done by 6:30 or 6 o'clock, right? Control, right? So with that it's about that practicing. We have to practice to take our foot off the gas pedal and know that there is something bigger happening here. And even
I'm
if
not-
you use that mantra, there's something bigger happening here. There's something bigger happening here. There's something bigger happening. We have to disrupt the disruptor. We have to disrupt the disruptor. And to do that, it's about getting those mantras, those sayings simple. I can't control, I can't control, I can't control, I can't control this, I can't control this. Whatever you can do to disrupt this disruptor about patterns, find language, find a saying. Boo Boo, I don't know if you found that finding a saying helped you to negotiate some of your world. And that's the thing about life is we have to find those languages that help us shift us up into a new knowing. Use sticky notes. Put something in your car, on the mirror when you wake up in the morning, when you're going to bed, things by your bedside, whatever you need to do to find a way to negotiate. For me, I had a piece of paper next to my bed. I trust, surrender, and accept. And each day I picked a word to work on as an intention. One day it was surrendering. The next day it was accepting. Another day it was trusting. And I played with that word all day long as my intention. Oh, here's a moment to practice surrendering. Okay, how am I going to work with this?
yeah, you're right. Another thing is just learning, trying to have. I found a couple people I can trust, fully trust, and that didn't happen all of a sudden. It was little by little, learning how to talk to people and communicate, and just talk about the human emotions and the human condition and the human mind and my fears and all that good stuff. I didn't have to be a trash compactor anymore and stuff all that stuff down. I learned how to talk about it and release the power. So little by little, I started to develop true friendship, where I can just be raw and real with someone. And so that's important in learning how to live in just in today. And when you can learn how to live in one day at a time, you start to live in the present moment where life really is. And that slot
Mhm.
machine mind starts to slow down.
Mhm.
And I start to have more peace. And my perception becomes a little bit more clear. It's less foggy. So that was helpful for me. Still
Oh,
is.
congratulations. Congratulations. And I want everybody to know, please, that we're all perfectly imperfect in this journey of walking forward. So give yourself grace when you have moments where it's like, oh, wish I had a time. I wish I would have done different. Practice doing better the next time. Practice doing better the next time. Well, Boo Boo, thank you so much for being here with me. I am so grateful for this moment. This was a tremendous show. I'm hoping that this show gets watched so that more people can be. I felt that there was a lot of good information that can maybe hopefully help somebody. And thank you for trusting the process of being guided through this for the
No,
better words.
thank you. And it was an honor, a privilege. And I left my number in case that person needs someone to talk to. So
Uh, okay. Yeah. Did you put it on the
comments.
did it go on the comments? I don't see it on the comments yet.
Huh. Well, anyways, if they do need someone to talk to, I'm here and they can reach out to you and get my number. They don't
Okay.
see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And is there an email or a website that they can go to find you?
Well, I have an email you can reach me at is podcast at gmail.com. Podcast at gmail.com.
Okay. Broader lens. Okay, I will put
Podcast.
that in the I will put that in the comments on YouTube and maybe on Facebook. I think I can update both of them.
No
And
problem.
then Broader Lance
Podcast.
podcast at Gmail. Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you. You broader almost should flip it around so that Broader Lance is on top of your head instead of the well, blessings to everyone, and thank you for being
Yeah,
here. I
thanks.
am live Wednesdays at 4 o'clock Pacific time. Next week is Regan Forston. He did my show with me, Next Level Soul. No, 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 no. Sorry. Ooh, gosh, my
Mhm.
brain. This eclipse is this Friday, and I am getting stirred up and being very human in these moments. So, thank you for being here. Regan Forston will be here next week at 4 o'clock Pacific time on my YouTube channel, Natasha Venter AC. If you'd like to listen to podcasts, this is on all podcast platforms that on Spotify and all the other ones. And you can reach it at Every Day with an Angel for podcasts. So thank you, Boo Boo, again for being here. I am looking forward to the next conversation we can have. I would love to have you back on again. And thank you, everyone, for watching. I am so grateful you were here. Please come and watch shows. Please, if you like this show, share it. If someone can use this show, share it, please. And like and follow if you would like to know more about some information about things. Blessings to you all, and thank you again for being here. And please look for my 2-minute videos for support in your life in the little dance. You don't necessarily have to
Mhm.
watch them, but you can sure listen. So blessings, everyone, and know that you are perfectly imperfect and so loved. So, so loved. Thank you, Boo Boo, again. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Take care. Bye bye.
You want to hang out for a minute?
Sure.